know that right after the talk, right here, Jeffrey's going to be doing a training. So if you feel like you want to learn how to tell others and warn others about GMOs, you can get that training right here today at 5:45, right after the talk. And then after the training at 6:30, you can go to the bookstore and get his book signed. If you want to get the book beforehand, you can come over, get the book, and then come over to the training too. So there's lots of different modalities here. But it's an amazing opportunity, and it would just be great to have everybody here become organizers and mobilizers against genetically modified organisms. So here, to get all of that inspiration and information and organizing going, I'd like you to welcome Jeffrey Smith to the stage here at Green Festival.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your good work.
Good afternoon, everyone. How many people here were really upset when the USDA approved genetically modified alfalfa in January? Raise your hand, okay? And how many of you were really upset when they reapproved the sugar beets a week later? Raise your hand. And how many of you remember when the alfalfa and the sugar beets were originally approved? 2. It was the same. Oh, we have some Monsanto people here. No, some non-Monsanto people. Okay. Some anti-Monsanto. Detectors. Thank you very much. Give them a hand.
Evidence! Unmarked GMO corn!
You know, it's interesting. Today, I'll tell you guys something. Today, about half an hour ago, I got something in my inbox. In Cyprus, they passed a law that any GMOs have to be on a separate shelf in the supermarket. It's like you have to sort of hold your nose as you go through that section. So you'll notice there were 2 people that raised their hand that were even aware when the alfalfa and the sugar beets were originally approved. And that was just a few years ago. And yet when they were reapproved in January, millions were pissed. Millions. The same event, this time it was noticed. This time people were mobilized, people were informed. This shows that our consciousness, our awareness has grown so dramatically in the United States on the GMO issue. And what I'm about to share with you now is how that fact, and if it's a specific type of consciousness, a specific type of awareness, we can eliminate GMOs. Now, if people are just pissed at Monsanto, that's pretty easy, actually. How many people are pissed at Monsanto? Yeah. That's easy. That's easy. However, what I am looking for is to create a tipping point of consumer rejection against GMOs in the marketplace. And imagine the 2 guys in hazmat suits, okay? Just imagine, I don't know if you can imagine this, just imagine 2 guys, old hippies, go around and pull crops from a field and create some kind of event in a supermarket and then celebrate and clip their glasses and eat corn chips. And not ever think about the fact that the corn is genetically engineered with a toxin designed to kill insects. That it breaks open the stomach of the insects and kills them. And a recent study found that same toxin in the blood of pregnant women and in the cord blood of the fetuses, actually of the newborns. So if you think that you're eating a poison, then you might think twice about eating the corn chip. And then we have the impact on the market, which realizes they can't use the poison anymore because they're losing market share. Now, what I believe is the shortcut to eliminate GMOs already took place. It took place in Europe. And here's the story. See the picture on the screen, Dr. Arpad Pustai? He's a friend of mine. He's the world's leading expert in his field, worked at the top nutritional research institute in the world. And he was given the job of figuring out how to test for the safety of GMOs. Now I'm going to tell this story, and it may have an impact, but I want to judge the level of impact of the story that I'm going to give you. So I'm going to do a pre-test, and then in a half an hour, I'm going to do a post-test. The pre-test is I'm going to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 100, how vigilant you have been at avoiding genetically modified foods. Even if you're a couple of old hippies in hazmat suits, I want to know if you're going and you're eating those corn chips, or you're avoiding those corn chips, or things with dextrose or maltodextrin, or things with the soy, or the sugar from sugar beets, or the milk from cows treated with bovine growth hormone. I want to know how vigilant you have been in the last 2 weeks at avoiding genetically modified foods. Now, I want to give you permission to rate yourself low. Most Americans on a scale of 1 to 100 are -7. They don't even know that GMOs exist. So, I'm going to ask you to rate yourself with a number from 1 to 100 right now. Most of you should be 1 to 20, that's low. How many are 1 to 20? Raise your hand. Proud, bold, everyone look around, see the numbers here, pre-test. Now, 20 to 40, raise your hand. Okay, high, okay. 40 to 60, 60 to 80, 80 to 100. Okay, now, rate yourself from 1 to 100 how active you have been at getting the word out about GMOs. Most people on a scale of 1 to 20 are on a scale of 1 to 100 are low. 1 to 20, that should be most of you. How many are 1 to 20? Raise your hand. Okay, most. 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, 80 to 100. Okay, this is the pre-test. I'm going to ask you in half an hour what your plans are for next month. So getting back to Dr. Pustai, okay? So here's the deal with Pustai. He's a brilliant man, a man of high integrity in science. His protocols were supposed to be implemented into EU law so that any assessment of GMOs required his tests. And so what he did, he took a potato, genetically engineered to produce an insecticide, and fed it to a bunch of rats. Another group got natural potatoes, and a third group got natural potatoes plus the insecticide that the GM potato was designed to produce. So you have the GM potato that produces an insecticide, non-GM potato, and non-GM potato plus the insecticide. Only those that ate the GM potato got sick. Why? It was not the insecticide. It was somehow the process of genetic engineering that caused the problem. Potentially precancerous cell growth in the digestive tract, smaller brains, livers, and testicles, partial atrophy of the liver, damaged immune system in 10 days. Take a look at the intestinal wall on the right, the proliferative cell growth, potentially precancerous. It's easier to see in the extra growth of the cells of the walls of the stomachs. This is from the process of genetic engineering itself, which creates massive collateral damage. Someone in the previous talk over at the Community Action Pavilion said, is there any crop that can be genetically engineered for our benefit right now? The answer is, with the current technology, it is so primitive, it is so dangerous, it is so prone to unpredicted side effects. The answer is no. You take the soybean, it's genetic. Here's how the soybean works. Monsanto scientists found bacteria growing at a chemical waste dump near their factory in the presence of Roundup herbicide, which was supposed to kill it. So they figured, great, let's put it in the food supply. So they took the gene out of the bacterium, which allowed it to survive the Roundup herbicide, put it into soybeans. And now the soybeans can survive massive sprays of Roundup and not die. Only all the other plant biodiversity in the field dies. And so if you talk to a biotechnologist, they'll say, oh, all we're doing is taking a gene from one thing and inserting it very carefully into another gene. That's wrong. The process is typically done with a gene gun. 2 to 4% of the DNA is different. Up to 1,000 genes can change their levels of expression. When a single gene is inserted, there can be hundreds or thousands of mutations. So that soybean has up to 7 times the amount of a known allergen. It has up to a doubling of an anti-nutrient. The corn has a new allergen that was not even expressed in natural corn. Both contain higher levels of lignin. The metabolic pathway that produces lignin produces rotenone, which is linked to Parkinson's disease. So eating their crops might give you Parkinson's disease, but no one knows because these unpredicted changes are not evaluated by the companies or by the regulators. So if you see this potentially precancerous cell growth, that's the process of genetic engineering, not the particular gene that was put in. Now, regarding the corn, let's go back to that corn. It produces a toxin that breaks open the stomach of insects and kills them. Okay? Now, it's called BT. How many people have ever used BT in their garden? Okay, by the way, how many people are gardeners? Raise your hand. Whoa! How many people are farmers? Raise your hand. Let's give the farmers a hand. All right. How many people eat? All right. I'm one of you. So BT is used by farmers, even organic gardeners. It's a natural soil bacteria. You gather it, you spray it, it kills insects, it biodegrades, it washes off, it's gone. But the engineers take the gene from the bacterium and put it into the crop, which is expressed at thousands of times the concentration. It's designed to be more toxic than the natural spray. It has properties of a known allergen. It doesn't wash off. If you ask the EPA, which is in charge of these official pesticide plants, they'll say, there's no problem. The BT has a history of safe use. It's destroyed during digestion. It has no impact on mammals. Well, if it's destroyed during digestion, why is it in the bloodstream of pregnant women and in their fetuses? If it's destroyed during digestion, why, when you give it to mice, they have tissue damage and an immune system response? If it has no effect on humans, why did about 500 people from Washington State and Vancouver have allergy and flu-like symptoms when they sprayed BT for gypsy moth infestation? Maybe there's someone here that had that result that wasn't reported. 500 people. Now, when farm workers in India pick the cotton that's engineered to produce this BT toxin, they're getting the same allergic and flu-like symptoms as those from Washington. But they're not getting sprayed. They're just touching the cotton plants. You can see the rashes on their bodies on the screen. I've seen videos of little kids with these same rashes on their faces during the time when they're in the fields picking the cotton. Then they allow animals to graze on the cotton plants after harvest. They've done it for years, no problem. They introduced this BT cotton. Thousands of sheep died. Thousands of other buffalo, goats died. They also had skin problems. Some friends of mine did a small study where they took 3 sheep and put them in one field of GM Bollgard BT1, 3 in Bollgard BT2, 3 in non-GM. These 6 died within a month. The 6 that ate the non-GM cotton, no deaths, no symptoms. I went to one village where they let their buffalo graze on cotton plants for 7 or 8 years without a problem. They grazed, 13 of them grazed on BT cotton plants for 1 day. The next day they were all unconscious or unable to move, and they all died within 3 days. I asked them, how many of you personally get itching when working in the fields, and most raised their hands. They also lost 26 goats and sheep. So this BT toxin is produced inside the corn chips, inside the corn, and it's in our blood. Now, the only human feeding study ever conducted and published on GMOs was done on soybeans. And they found in human subjects, before they ever fed them genetically modified soy, inside the DNA of the bacteria living inside their intestines was the gene that the scientists found in the chemical waste dump near their factory. And it wasn't there naturally. It was from some previous meal where they ate genetically modified soy and the gene transferred into their gut bacteria and continued to function. That means long after we stop eating genetically modified crops, we may still have these foreign proteins produced inside of us. So eating the corn chips. So let's say you've just done a demonstration in hazmat suits, and you go and you look at a corn chip now, and you're holding it and you're looking at it and go, my goodness, this does not say organic, it does not say non-GMO. This might be a BT corn chip. And if I eat this corn chip, maybe the gene that produces the BT will transfer to my gut bacteria and turn it into living pesticide factories, possibly for the rest of my life. Maybe I'll eat the organic corn chip. But you know, you don't have to hate Monsanto to love your gut. So even if you don't hate Monsanto, even if you've never heard of Monsanto, if you realize that eating a genetically modified corn chip can be so dangerous, especially for kids, then you're going to buy the non-GMO. It will become a market and liability. So what happened with Dr. Pustai, the guy that found the potentially precancerous cell growth in the digestive tract? Well, he went public with his concerns and was a hero for about 2 days. And then 2 phone calls were placed from the UK Prime Minister's office, forwarded through the receptionist to the director. The next day he was gone. He was fired from his job after 35 years, silenced with threats of a lawsuit. His 20-member team was disbanded. They never implemented the protocols. Instead, they embarked on a campaign to destroy his reputation, to protect the reputation of biotechnology. For 7 months, he was unable to speak. For 7 months, he had to endure lies by his old boss, by the UK government, by the biotech industry, which had formed a cabal designed to destroy him. But on February 16th, 1999, a gag order was lifted by the order of Parliament, and he was able to speak. 3 weeks before that, at a biotech conference, Arthur Anderson, Monsanto's consultant, revealed that it was their plan to help Monsanto genetically engineer 100% of all commercial seeds in the world and patent them. And another biotech company projected a 95% takeover of all commercial seeds within 5 years. But the lifting of the gag order was followed by 750 articles within a single month. The tipping point of consumer rejection was achieved. And within a week, 10 weeks after the gag order was lifted, within a single week, virtually every major food company committed to stop using GM ingredients. It derailed this plan and the timeline by the biotech industry to replace nature. One high-profile GMO food safety scandal, and it was gone, out of Europe. It was not the government that removed GMOs from Europe. It was consumers at the top of the food chain dictating terms to the food companies, who could no longer use it because it was a marketing liability. What have we seen recently in the US? Bovine growth hormone kicked out of Walmart, Starbucks, Yoplait, Dannon, most of Americans' dairies. Why would they eliminate bovine growth hormone? Well, General Mills said, our consumers have asked for it, and we have given it to them. And why? Because the milk has more pus, more antibiotics, more bovine growth hormone, and a cancer-linked hormone called IGF-1. A former Monsanto scientist said to me, the 3 scientists and his friends in Monsanto who were doing safety studies on the milk saw how much IGF-1 was created, and they stopped drinking milk after that unless it was organic. One but a cow. They won't take their own stuff, but they'll feed it to us. Yes, it's easy to hate Monsanto. And we've seen this slow motion tipping point against bovine growth hormone without the high profile coverage. And yet Consumers at the top of the food chain kicked it out. So how many consumers do we need to turn GMOs into a marketing liability? If GMOs were sugar, well, that's got a consumer benefit, I think. If GMOs were salt, that's got some benefit. What if it were trans fats? Well, there's some mouthfeel there. There's some people like trans fat. There's no consumer benefits. Either they drink poison, herbicide tolerant, or they produce poison and kill insects. No one's clamoring for their daily dose of GMOs. So without any consumer benefits, let's say you're the marketer in Kraft Foods, the largest food manufacturer in the US, who's already removed GM ingredients from their European brands and their Japanese brands. They are just looking to see if the issue gets traction in the US. They are just looking to see if there's a drop in market share that they can identify as a new trend against GMOs in the US, and they saw it explode in Europe. So we think 5% of US shoppers, 5%, 15 million Americans would be sufficient to cause the drop in market share, to demonstrate a trend, and have them scampering for non-GM ingredients, which won't even require that they change their recipes, because there's non-GM corn to replace the GM corn, etc. 5%. So in order to get the 5%, we need people to be motivated to avoid eating GMOs. I'm just curious, based on what we talked about in terms of the corn chips, how many people here have increased their vigilance number rating from 1 to 100? Raise your hand. Okay, just checking. We're going to check your numbers in a minute. All right? So let's check your numbers after this. GM soybeans. All right? Soon after GM soy was introduced to the UK, soy allergy skyrocketed by 50%. Many reasons why it could be GMO. It has changes in the digestive capacity, increased allergens, increase of a known allergen, more pesticides, or more herbicides. Let me show you a picture of a rat liver on the right. That animal was fed GM soy. On the left, the rat was fed non-GM soy. See the gnarly difference? The liver is the major detoxifier of the organ, of the body. Look at the testicles, pink and blue. Eating the GM soy changed the testicles from pink to blue. I'll let that sink in for a minute. These rats are from a Moscow laboratory. They're Russian-speaking rats. And they volunteered for a soy feeding experiment and were fed GM soy starting 2 weeks before they got pregnant, and more than half of their babies died within 3 weeks, compared to 10% death rate among the controls eating non-GM soy. They also looked quite a bit different and were smaller on average. And in a subsequent study, were not able to reproduce. Hamsters fed GM soy in another Russian Academy of Sciences experiment 5 years later were fed GM soy for 2 years. By the third generation, most lost the ability to have babies. They also died at 5-fold rate of infant mortality, and some had hair growing in their mouths. Mice in Italy had changes in their testicles. Rats in Brazil had changes in the uterus and ovaries. Mice in Italy, the embryo offspring, DNA, functioned differently when the parents had been fed GM soy compared to non-GM soy. Mice fed corn that was Roundup Ready and BT. The more corn that they were fed, the less babies they had, the fewer babies they had. The smaller the babies they had. So, has anyone's numbers changed recently? Raise your hand. Anyone more vigilant? Just checking. There's more herbicide on the Roundup Ready products. Now, that is a problem because Roundup is linked to placental cell death, endocrine disruption, less sperm cells, abnormal sperm, cancer, and birth defects. Now, Roundup does not kill plants directly. It creates a perfect storm by weakening the plant and then causing increased diseases in the soil which overrun the plant. The way that it weakens the plant is interesting. It was originally patented as a chelator. Chelators hug nutrients and don't let them go. They bind with them. So Roundup hugs tons of nutrients, zinc, manganese, magnesium, selenium, all these different nutrients, and it doesn't let it go. So it does not let the plant get the nutrients. Here's an example of iron, manganese, and zinc. See how dramatic the reduction in root uptake and translocation is. That means it starves the plant of basic nutrients. The plant becomes defenseless against disease. The same active ingredient in Roundup causes an increase in plant diseases, which overruns the plant. In fact, there's over 40 diseases in the United States in plant diseases that are on the rise because of Roundup and glyphosate, which is its active ingredient. I understand that livestock in the U.S., the primary type of food that they eat is Roundup ready. Soy, corn, cotton seeds, canola, sugar beet pulp, they're all genetically modified. Roundup ready is the primary cause. And when you feed these animals these nutrient deficient crops, then they become nutrient deficient. Some veterinarians say when they send organs of dead animals for study, there is a universal reduction in nutrients such as manganese, in some cases undetectable levels of manganese. And glyphosate and Roundup persist in the soil for months or years, affecting crop health. You see on the right, the same seeds planted, but in that field, glyphosate or Roundup was used for 10 years on the right compared to 1 year on the left. Now, we eat the animals that are nutrient deficient and sick as a result, perhaps. We eat the nutrient deficient crops, and we then have the effects. Now, the alfalfa was just approved, Roundup ready alfalfa. You can see the dramatic reduction in nutrients in alfalfa, so our animals will get even more sick when they eat the hay from alfalfa. A 49% reduction in iron, a 31% reduction in manganese, 46% reduction in potassium. Some of you may have read on the internet about a new organism. Let me tell you the backstory. I'll mention it quickly. Scientists found a tiny, tiny, ultra-microscopic organism that's completely new to science. It looks like a fungus. It's the size of a virus. It reproduces, and it was extracted from the tissues of aborted fetuses of livestock. And it appeared in high concentrations of livestock that were having trouble either infertile or having spontaneous abortions. And then it was traced to high concentrations in crops that were treated with Roundup or Roundup ready crops. And it was found in high concentrations in certain plants that were diseased. And the disease was also associated with Roundup. And they've been able to take that organism and, in a laboratory, instigate spontaneous abortions in animals. This was supposed to be secret information because it has not yet been studied sufficiently to release in the scientific papers. But a secret letter written by Dr. Don Huber, a world expert at Roundup, to Secretary Vilsack, was leaked onto the internet, which is why I'm speaking about it today. We need more information, we need more funding for this particular research to go on, and so we can draw appropriate conclusions at that point. How do we stop the genetic engineering of food supply? I'm going to ask you now to think of one thing. If GMOs are responsible for the diseases that we see, how would we know? In 1996, 7% of Americans had 3 or more chronic illnesses. Now, 9 years later, it was 13%. Food-related illnesses doubled between 1994 and 2001. Autism skyrocketed recently, food allergies, especially among kids, gastrointestinal problems, reproductive problems, all on the rise. If someone goes to a doctor with those problems, do they say, have you been eating soy or corn? No. L-tryptophan was genetically engineered by a company in the 1980s. It killed 100 Americans and caused 5,000 to 10,000 to fall sick. It created a completely new disease that was acute and fast-acting. And because it was new diseases and acute and fast-acting, it was begging to be identified. And it still took 4 years to discover, and it was almost missed. So we don't know if genetic engineering is contributing to these problems that we're seeing day to day. But the American Academy of Environmental Medicine says we don't need to wait. They urge all doctors to prescribe non-GMO diets to every single patient in America because they say the animal feeding studies alone on GMOs show reproductive problems, immune system problems, accelerated aging, organ damage, gastrointestinal problems, etc. So, I'd like you to rate yourself from 1 to 100 now, how vigilant you will be next week at avoiding genetically modified foods. How many people are low vigilance? 1 to 20, raise your hand. Low vigilance. 20 to 40. 40 to 60. 60 to 80. 80 to 100. Most are 80 to 100. 80 to 100, just hold your hand up one more time. Look around, so don't look around, just see the numbers. Most are 80 to 100. Now I've been speaking for 30 minutes, but I can do it in 10. I just like to tell stories. I can do it in 8, maybe 5. And it doesn't matter that you are a green audience. The same thing happens with doctors. I was in San Francisco a week and a half ago, Andrew Miles, Integrative Medicine. Same thing happened to 800 doctors and healthcare practitioners. It happens with food dining managers. It happens with lawyers, although you have to pay them. Everywhere I go in America, we find the antidote to genetically engineered foods, and that is telling people the truth. And I didn't even tell you why they were approved. I didn't even tell you the thing that usually creates receptivity to every other piece of information. And that is the person who's in charge of policy at the FDA that allowed GMOs to go on the market without a single safety study, without any required labeling, without even having companies to tell the FDA. That was Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former attorney, who later became Monsanto's vice president, who's now the U.S. food safety czar. And the single sentence in the policy that was the basis for this hands-off policy said, we're not aware of any information showing that GMOs are different. That was a lie. 44,000 secret internal memos from the agency were made public by a lawsuit. It turns out the overwhelming consensus among the scientists at the FDA were that GMOs were unsafe and could create allergies, toxins, new diseases, and nutritional problems. We saw those, they're actually happening. So, we can't rely on the government. We ask, how do we stop the genetic engineering of the food supply? We don't whine to the Obama administration and say, bail us out. We take responsibility and create a tipping point of consumer rejection. And we've seen here that education is the key. We have packaged this information that you heard in 30 minutes into books, DVDs, and CDs. We have Seeds of Deception, which is for the right-brain reader. It's like stories of Arpad Pusztai and the takeover of the FDA. We have Hidden Dangers in Kids' Meals. Can anyone guess the strategy that we created that one for? That's for parents of young kids. We have The World According to Monsanto. Yes, it's easy to hate Monsanto, and if you watch this, you'll want to break them on the spot. Very powerful film. And we have a little activist package in the deal. We have Genetic Roulette. This is the left brain book. We open it up, and there's a 2-page spread for every risk. The left side is a summary for the attention deficit politician. The right side is detailed cited text for their staff, so people can just flip through and read all of the things in just a few minutes. So it's for the short attention span, left brain person. And then we have the video, everything you have to know about dangerous genetically modified foods, which is me giving the same talk in an hour and a half. And I was interviewed on a TV show. The host, Alex Boguski, and his dad was on the show. And he said to me, I've been trying to get my parents to change their diet for years. I gave him your video, and he didn't look at it, but he gave it to my mom. And then the dad came in and said, and the next day I didn't recognize anything in the refrigerator. So you can make as many copies of this as you want. It's available back over there. You can also see it online. You can watch Hidden Dangers and Kids' Meals online. You can go online and sign up for our free newsletter. You can watch all sorts of things. And the most important thing is, how do I avoid GMOs? And we have the non-GMO shopping guide. Go to non-GMOshoppingguide.com or download onto your iPhone, Shop No GMO. And you can also order pocket shopping guides, or download a 2-page version, or look online to all the different categories. You can see the product categories. There's thousands of products, all enrolled in the Non-GMO Project, the third-party verification system to back up non-GMO claims. We have non-GMO education centers in stores nationwide where health-conscious shoppers eat. But if you think about it, if all we need is 5%, think about how easy it will be. 15 million people is nothing, especially when you break it down, that's only 5.6 million households. Cesar Chavez said, when they found after the first boycott, all they needed to get was 4.6% reduction in market share, I was told, and they would win each time. So if we need 5%, if that's the number, we already have 28 million Americans that buy organic on a regular basis. We have 87 million that think it's very unsafe. We have 47% of Americans that think it's maybe responsible for health problems. And 53% of Americans say they wouldn't eat it if it were labeled. 53%. If 9 out of 10 of those are lying, we still get our 5%. And 95% of Americans want labeling. So we're actually the majority. Isn't it weird? We who come to Greenfest on this, we're actually part of the majority. I know it's uncomfortable for some of you. Just breathe, take it in. Just deal with it, okay? But here's the issue. The issue is we have enough people on our side so we don't have to convince anyone who is resistant in order to get rid of GMOs. We give them a shopping guide, and we don't sell the shopping guide in groups of 1. 25 is the minimum you can get if you buy it from our site, because we want you to be activists. We want you to be part of the tipping point. The most common reaction when I give someone a shopping guide is, can I have some more? So we would like you to be part of our non-GMO tipping point network. We are starting 108 local non-GMO action groups. And we will start one here in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes, if you would like to be part of a local non-GMO action group, stay behind, get in the front row, in the first few lines, and we will organize a local group where you can meet regularly, and if you're out in a outlying area, you can meet others in that area. And whether you stay here or not, you can go to responsibletechnology.org and sign up for the Tipping Point Network. You'll be given a link to a forum where you can find your local group, but it doesn't stop there. There are also national groups, and the national groups are divided by target. So there's a group that's focused on religious and spiritual, because some religious groups think GMO means God move over. There's groups focused on healthcare practitioners, lots of them. There's groups focused on farmers markets and CSAs, groups focused on youth, on campuses, on schools, on parents, all sorts of receptive demographics, each sufficient enough and large enough to create the tipping point on its own. And you get to work with everyone in the network who's focusing on the same outreach, so there's a synergy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So you can be part of a local group and a national group. And if you want to learn to speak about GMOs, we are giving an all-day workshop tomorrow at the Courtyard, Courtyard by Marriott, 612 2nd Avenue, 9:30 to 5. You all will receive this. The address is on there. And we have opportunities for scholarships up to half price, and you can just show up and request that, and we can give that to you. We trained nearly 500 people in the last 12 months. 500 people in how to speak on GMOs. So we are creating the basis of a revolution. Now, here's the very good news. It's already starting to happen. The tipping point is starting to mount. And you know how I know? Remember the question I asked you at the beginning? How many were upset about alfalfa? And how many even knew that alfalfa was approved years ago? It's already starting. Supermarket News predicted at the end of 2009 that 2010 would see an unprecedented upsurge of consumer awareness and concern, and it happened. I'm the only one that's been crisscrossing the U.S. speaking about the health dangers of GMOs year after year for 8 years, and last year I saw an unprecedented upsurge of consumer action, informed consumers taking action. And then came the high-profile news coverage of salmon, of alfalfa, of sugar beets, putting it into mainstream papers. And I wasn't the only one that was seeing a lot of people active and focused on GMOs. The Organic Consumers Association saw the same thing, and they created the Millions Against Monsanto distribution network, which is fantastic because we now have two groups, and they're focused a lot on the labor, and we're focused a lot on consumer decision-making, and we're working together. So what we have is the basis of a revolution. We have the basis of a revolution, and if you don't get on board quick, you're going to miss it. So I would like to ask you if you would like to have on your resume help to end the genetic engineering of the food supply, 2011 and 12. Raise your hand if you'd like to do that. Okay. So I'd like you to rate yourself from 1 to 100 how active you would like to be in educating people about GMOs. How many people don't particularly want to be active, and that's fine? That would be 1 to 20. Raise your hand. 20 to 40? 40 to 60? 60 to 80? 80 to 100. Most. All it took was the truth, and we did it in 44 and a half minutes. So, here's what the plan is now. If you would like to enroll in a non-GMO action group, and you can't stay behind, doesn't matter, go online, responsibletechnology.org, sign up. If you'd like to be part of a group and you can stay behind, it'll be about 40 minutes of a meeting. In either case, you're welcome to go and purchase any of the tools that we've created strategically for outreach. I'm happy to sign books, and if you can't wait till the end of the thing, just bring it in and hand it to me, and I'll sign it while I'm running this show here, because I want you to have the tools if you'd like to get them. So, tomorrow, if you'd like to be part of the speaker training, show up at the Marriott. It's 0.8 miles from here, 9:30 in the morning. Is there any urgent question that we have to answer or urgent announcement we have to cover before we break? Anything? All right, so before I end, I want to say this. I have heard other speakers talk about our great-great-grandchildren. And with GMOs, it is so obvious that they are knocking at our door. You'll notice how I did not cover the environmental risks about GMOs in this whole talk. And they may be worse. Because the self-propagating genetic pollution that has already been released can outlast the effects of global warming and nuclear waste. We can dramatically reduce the exposure of GMOs, but we don't have a technology today to fully clean it up. And they still want to replace nature, and they have basically a genetically engineered apple and alfalfa and every single thing that's on the shelves in the laboratories waiting to be introduced. I'm not against the process of genetic engineering per se. Maybe it'll help someone in a particular gene therapy to correct a defect, but it is irresponsible to feed the products of the infant science to the entire population or release them into the environment where they can never be recalled. And our great-great-grandchildren are knocking at our door, but it's not just them. It's every human being on earth, and it's not just them. It's every organism on earth, including that which is living inside our gut, is waiting to see how we react and waiting to celebrate our success. And so I ask you to please join me in this wonderful endeavor to speak for our great-grandchildren, to speak for our gut bacteria, to speak for the oceans, and to reclaim a non-GMO food supply. Thank you very much.